Hello, Serie A fans, and welcome to the Total Football Analysis Serie A podcast. The longest Serie A season is over, almost a year since it kicked off in August of 2019. We're going to wrap up this exciting year with our TFA Serie A team. I am your host, Daniele Prok, and I'm joined by football analyst Steve Coleman from Wellington, New Zealand, where it's just 7 a.m. Buongiorno, Steve.
Yeah, morning, Danny. How you going?
And doing pretty good. And I'm also joined by Professor at UNC Chapel and EPL podcast host, Chris Mumford. How are you, Chris?
Good. Buon pomeriggio.
Well, since this past weekend's game were decisive for relegation, why don't we start with a recap, beginning with the two decisive games that Genoa and Lecce played. So I'm talking about the Genoa Verona and Lecce Parma games. Lecce was occupying the highest of the three relegation spots, with Il Grifone standing 1 point above them before kickoff. Genoa did their job, beating Verona 3-0 at home thanks to a brace by Antonio Sanabria and a goal by Christian Romero, while Lecce lost at home 4-3 in a game that saw I Salentini conceding goals again way too easily. They have the worst defense in the league with 85 goals conceded. You know, as I was watching the game, I heard the commentator saying, Lecce found a team who's defending nearly as bad as they do. And Steve, I bet that that did not surprise you, because you had alerted us of Lecce's defensive shakiness back in June, right?
Yeah, I did. I think they are the team who concede the most shots from the shortest distance in the league, which, as I said way back before we started on the relegation stuff, that was always gonna hurt them. And I think that, you know, they scored 3 goals in the final day and still got beat, which is a testament to how poor they've been in and around the edge of their box so far this season. You know, over 80 goals conceded, just over 2 per game, and that's the game against Parma is a clear indicator of that.
Yeah, it is hard to not relegate when you have that shaky of a defense. So Spal, Brescia, and Lecce will play Serie B football next year, and they are going to make room for Benevento, the team coached by Super Pippo Inzaghi, Crotone, and the winner of the Serie B playoffs, which will be played later this week. As we work our way up the table, I would like to bring up any honorable mentions in terms of players or teams that did well, and why not maybe coaches. I will start with Udinese keeper Juan Musso, who had the most clean sheets during this Serie A season with 14. Chris, how do you like Musso?
I think he's great. You know, I think he is a gem. I'll be very curious to see if Udinese can hold on to him. You know, as far as the difference in expected goals, you know, he was expected to have 46 scored on him, and he had 46 scored on him, and he was expected to have 51. So those 6 goals, right where Udinese is placed, is real difference maker. So clearly one of the top 5 keepers in the league this year.
Yeah, and Musso is Argentine, right? So I'm thinking with Musso, with Martinez, who plays for Arsenal, and with Armani, who plays for River, I'm thinking, has manager Lionel Scaloni solved the problems of Argentine goalkeepers, which was something that, you know, the Argentine national team always struggle with? What do you guys think?
Well, I think that the truth is that there has been an Argentine goalkeeper revolution going on. It's just taken a little bit of time for them to mature and really get into their own. Goalkeepers generally require a few more years of seasoning before they hit their prime, kind of late 20s or even early 30s. And I think that there was a gap there with the Argentine national team. But, you know, folks like Estudiantes is very, very well known. They've got a strong track record for sending Argentine keepers over to Europe, and Serie A is usually one of the first places to start, along with La Liga. But Serie A in particular has been a many year relationship between those two countries, and I expect that to continue. I see the revolution happening, and I'm glad to see Argentina is leading that part of the goalkeeper revolution.
I certainly agree. I also would like to spend a couple of words on a player, a very young player who stood out this season for Parma. That's Dejan Kulusevski. He joined the short list of under 21 players with 10 goals this Serie A season. Not only 10 goals, he also recorded 8 assists playing as a right winger for Parma. We know that he is a Juventus player and will likely join the Bianconeri during the next Serie A season. Steve, how do you see him play with Dybala and Ronaldo in Sarri's next in Juventus's next year with Sarri?
Well, I think he fits in a little bit like Douglas Costa maybe, or Bernardeschi on that side. Obviously, you're not gonna shift those other two big guns out of that side. So I think he probably slides into that side. The long term future of the other two is probably up for debate. So a young guy, and they need to regenerate. So he's a good example of someone who can come in and fill some spaces for sure.
Yeah, and another striker who did very well this season was Sassuolo's forward Francesco Caputo. 21 goals for him. I think he's worth a mention. This was his second Serie A season because he had been in Serie A few years ago, but really didn't record a lot of appearances. This year, 36 appearances, 21 goals, only 2 penalty kicks. He was key for Sassuolo. And you know what? Let me also say something about the coach of Sassuolo, Roberto De Zerbi. Steve, how champagne football was did he play with the Neroverdi?
Yeah, I think they've been a real entertaining side to watch so far this season. To be fair, looking at the table and the X points, I think they've ended up exactly where they've meant to have ended up. An 8th place finish for that side is a good starting point for a future with a good, attractive style of football that they've played. I think they've come unstuck a little bit. They got beat by Udinese on the last match day, which is probably a sign of their league position in terms of the motivation. But before that, they've had great draws with Juventus and Atalanta, and they've played some real attractive football and some attacking threats that they have. Certainly going to benefit from an extra season in the league come next season for sure.
Yeah, they certainly have a lot of quality up there with Boga, with Juricic, Berardi, and Caputo himself. Whether I expected, I did expect Sampdoria, Torino, Cagliari, those teams to save themselves. If there was a team that I was not expected to see that high up the table was Verona. The way they played this year was incredible. They ended the season with 49 points. At some point in June, they were also trying to make a run for a Europa League spot, but obviously Napoli and Milan were going too fast for them. Steve, what are the main tactical trends that you saw in Verona that helped them, finish the season strongly?
I know Chris will give me a bit of stick for this, but they're obviously one of the promoted sides into the league. Last season they came up via the Serie B playoffs, so the fact that they finished 9th in the league and the other two promoted sides, Brescia and Lecce, have gone down is a testament to how well they've done. Really, one little stat for you is they've conceded 1.26 goals per game. That record is the same as 3rd place Atalanta. And it's only bettered by those teams that are in the top 4 at the moment, which I think is incredible. Incredible stat and a real kind of underpinning part to why they are so high in the league. So not only are they very vertical in the way they play, they like to get the ball forwards quickly, but with purpose rather than being a long ball side. They play with good purpose into the top line, but they defend so well around the edge of their box. And if you compare them to Lecce, like we spoke about earlier, their ability to defend wide areas compared to someone like Lecce, who let many crosses and many opportunities into their box when they don't get enough pressure on the ball, especially in wide areas, is a real constant for them. And I think they can be proud, but with their stability and sustainability in Serie A, whether they can continue that moving forwards and keep hold of the players they've got is up for debate. But I think they can be very pleased with where they ended up for sure.
Yeah, big credit to the manager Juric, who was able to put together a team that was not only solid defensively, but Like you said, it was very entertaining to watch. I especially liked how they used the flanks and the two trequartisti in the half space. So we'll see if Verona will able to do as well for the next season. Let's move to the top 7 teams, beginning with Napoli, who arguably disappointed a little bit this season. I would say they saved faces with the Coppa Italia win. They had some problems in the season. Gattuso took the team over from Ancelotti. That was a big sack because it's never easy to sack such a legendary coach like Ancelotti. Steve, what do you think of Napoli? Do you agree that they really didn't perform up to their potential this season?
Yeah, I mean it's a tough one. They obviously had a bit of a turbulent start to it with the changeover in manager. I think if you watch their last game against Lazio, I thought they were excellent. Great value in a game that didn't really mean a lot. Obviously, Lazio have struggled a little bit since the restart depth-wise, but I think what you get with Napoli is what you get every week. That they're so creative, they're so busy in what they do. Gattuso's got them playing a real nice way. They continue the high pressure and the kind of dominating the ball and without the ball as well, which is a real testament to the way he's come in and done that. And they've got some fantastic attacking players who have finished in the top ends of categories around the league in ball possession. You've got Mario Rui, left back, who's been fantastic and it leads the league in passes completed and per game. And then you've got the guy with almost the same name in midfield, who's just so dominant with the ball that he moves them forward. He scored a great goal at the weekend. Off the back of, ironically, that high pressure, which is what they do so well. And they're a real opportunity to finish higher next season. But I think that they can be happy where they are right now. They obviously, the Coppa Italia win gets them into Europe, regardless of whether they finish 5th or 7th. It didn't really matter to them. But I think every week they're becoming more and more Gattuso's team, and I think they're gonna be up there challenging, in next season, which is going to be a really competitive league next season, I think.
Yeah. So, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
My take on it is that they finished 21 points below Juve. That's a long time away. And their payroll is 103 million euros, which is 1/3 of Juventus. But most of the teams are around between 100 and 140. So I think it's fair to say they underperformed considerably. That being said, their finish, or we'll call it the COVID season, they did really well, right? They really stuck it out, and one has to hope that, as you mentioned, Steve, that getting that strong finish gets them optimistic for next season, which, oh, by the way, is only a few weeks away, right? They get 2 weeks off of holiday, and all of a sudden they got to show back up to work again.
It is.
Well, I'll counter you on that, Chris, because as you guys well know, I've been quite vehement in the banging the Juventus and Napoli drama, and Juventus are basically Napoli without Ronaldo. So in the wash up of the finish of the season, Napoli's X points 65. They ended on 62, but Juventus X point was 66. So there's a point between them according to the X point table. But obviously Juventus finished with 83. So I'm pretty convinced, according to those stats, that the Ronaldo, and I'm sure Chris is going to mention the goalkeeper as well, but Ronaldo factor there. Napoli have guys to put the ball in the goal, but it's more spread across a group as opposed to one focal point in their side, and I think that's a big factor.
We'll work our way up to Juve. I'm excited about digging down into that more, but carry on.
Steve, I think you said it right, that Napoli could be Juventus without Ronaldo, because even though the work of Gattuso is evident, you mentioned the ball possession is the best in the league. They make they complete a lot of passes, but they clearly had problems with finishing their chances in the final third. That's why The top scorer for Napoli is Milik. He only has 11 goals, if I remember correctly. So I think that next year, in order to challenge Juventus for the title, they have to really improve their game when it comes to finishing chances. That's why they bought Osimhen. That could be the Nigerian striker. That could be the game changer. By the way, let me spend a word for Jose Callon, who leaves Napoli after 7 years. He recorded 255 caps out of 266 available matches. That means that he barely was injured or suspended in 7 years. And, the Callejón run, the classic burst look, waiting for the pass from Insigne, who cuts in from the left side, will surely be remembered by the Napoli fans. But let's move up to the table. And the sixth position, we have AC Milan, who did particularly well since the restart because, as Steve can confirm, they are first in the post-COVID table.
Yeah, they are indeed. They ended up with 9 wins from 12 games with 3 draws. Didn't get beat since the restart, for a total of 30 points, which, for a team that were kind of hanging to see whether they could make a Europa League spot, and there was a few teams around them that could have also jumped in there. They've done amazing work, Pioli, since the restart, and I think they've been really bright, really, really good to watch, enjoyable. Certainly not going to get back to the early 2000s anytime soon, but they're heading in the right direction, that's for sure.
And about AC Milan, obviously we are going to end up talking about Zlatan Ibrahimovic. At 38 years old and 10 months, he is the oldest player to reach 10 goals in a single Serie A season. If there's another player that I'd like to mention, that's Hakan Çalhanoğlu, who struggled in the past years at AC Milan, but this year really seems to have found a way to make a difference. He scored 9 goals, recorded 8 assists, and I think he will be the focal point for Milan next year, the perfect number 10 for Pioli. There is another guy who is going to leave his team. That's Giacomo Bonaventura. After 6 years at AC Milan, he said farewell. He was in tears after the game. He was alone, sitting in the middle of the pitch at San Siro. It was quite of a sad image. But what else am I missing about AC Milan, Chris? Anything to add about the keeper?
I'd actually like to ask Steve. I mean, is Zlatan, should he be invited back? And I imagine he's asking for a 2 or 3 year deal at 38 years old. And the agent is also Donnarumma's agent. So there's a package. So anything with Zlatan seems to be complicated.
And Donnarumma's brother, right?
Yeah. So how do you unpack that, Steve? What's going to happen here? What should happen and what's going to happen?
Well, if I was in Pioli's shoes, I would try and tie him in for another season. I think it's quite clear right now that he's perhaps not the player that Milan want, but he's the player that Milan need, to coin a Batman phrase. I think he makes the players around him better. Daniele's just mentioned Çalhanoğlu there. Yeah, I think he makes him better. I think he acts as a focal point. In future, I believe you're going to get Rafael Leao kind of leading the line and coming into becoming more prevalent in that side. And there's a real growing depth in that Milan squad right now, where Pioli's given opportunities to players, and even when they've struggled with injury and suspension, as they have done recently, and they've brought extra players in, I don't think there's been a huge drop off in what you've seen from them. So. But I think he's another year. Would be my observation there. I think Daniele said not long ago that they average more points with him in the side than without him, and I think that's been quite clear since the restart, where he's come in and played not every minute, but he's played the vast majority of the games and been a real presence within those games. I think you have to bring him for one more season until guys like Leao and those fellas are able to kind of do it on their own.
Yeah, until things take off. I agree. And in terms of making the players around him better, I was reading something on the web, and I haven't fact checked that, so please don't attribute this statement to me. But I was reading that when Ibrahimovic came to AC Milan, he went up to Samu Castillejo and he told him, "Listen, you're not good." And since then, Castillejo performed very well. I mean, even this past weekend, he scored and he's been like a very good offensive threat for AC Milan. But I can see how his presence is intimidating. How players around him are encouraged to do better um, because they see Zlatan and they kind of don't want to let him down in a way. They want to gain his approval, and that makes the entire team better. Um, Pioli himself benefited a lot from Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Pioli extended his contract until 2022. So we'll see if he will be able to take AC Milan back to the Champions League spot, which is what the fans are expecting to see.
Yeah, I think the
fans,
Pioli,
including myself.
the Pioli thing is interesting. Signing a new deal for an extended period of time is a good sign for Milan fans because it gives them potential sustainability. But it's going to be hard for them to keep everyone around. I think without being funny, guys like Hernandez should be playing Champions League football. He's such a threat down that left hand side. He's so dynamic, and there'll be without being funny, big clubs. Sorry, Daniele, should be tapping on his shoulder to come and play in the Champions League. And that's going to be the challenge for Milan. They've got Europa League football next year, which will be great, but they've got a small window of opportunity here to really kick on if they can, and if they don't, then I think you're going to find them back to where they started from quickly.
But let me drive 1 point home. Is Zlatan worth signing a 2-year contract with? Because I'm nearly certain that's what he's asking, 2 or 3 year. 1 year is a no-brainer. But where he is in his career, I'm sure he'd like to get 2 years out of this. Is he worth it?
Do you know, he'd be 40, wouldn't he? I mean, there's multiple examples, especially in Serie A, of players playing until they're 40. To be honest with you, I would sign him for 2. If that's what he was taking at the moment. You can always move him on. There's no issue. But I think at the same time, he has to understand that he's going to have potentially a reduced role as he moves on. And if he's happy to do that, then it sounds like he's a good man in the dressing room. And he, as I said, he makes players better around him. So for me, it's a pretty simple yes.
Yeah. I don't know if I would do it, Chris, because at that age, if you pick up an injury, it takes so long to recover. I know that technically it's not human, right? That's at least what he says on social media, but lions don't recover like humans, quoting Zlatan Ibrahimovic. But I don't know, 2 years is a long time. He'll be 40.
Yeah, but the dressing room is the important place. The pitch is obviously where he does the work in the spotlight, but I'm sure he does a lot of work in the dressing room with the players, and for that young group, or vast majority of those young players that are coming through, I think he's a Buffon type figure that is important off the pitch as well as on it.
I want to chime in. I think you sign him for 2 years with an option for a third to keep him around, because and I'm not saying that third has to be exercised, but that's what he's asking for. Because here's the bottom line. AC Milan they don't have the money to go out and buy a comparable striker. In COVID, you got to go with what you have, right? And I just feel like they need to lock him down, because he is a freak. There's no question about that. And he probably could play to 40. And all I know is you see the fear in the defenders and how he pulls that back line out of shape so many times to open up things for everybody else. And I really think that, gosh, if they had him before January, they had some key losses in November and December. Maybe things could have changed there, right? Maybe they could have vied for a Champions League spot if he came in. Of course, he would not have been the legend that he was in LA if that had happened. But still, my other question to y'all is Donnarumma. What do you sign? Do you extend with him or not?
I think you keep him for the same reason you just mentioned about Ibrahimovic there. Who do you get comparably that's as good, if not better than him right now in the current climate?
Yeah. How about you, Daniele? What do you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. He has to stay, and I think that right now he's also happy. Versus a couple years ago, there were some rumors of him being unhappy with the team. Um, you have to keep him. He was arguably top 3 goalkeepers this season, together with Szczesny, Strakosha, at least for the pre COVID period. But yeah, you have to keep Donnarumma. And for Zlatan, let's settle on this: 2 years with a section that says that if he gets injured, his contract will get cut in half. Okay.
Hey, as a player, Daniele, you should never accept that sort of deal. But I will tell you, Donnarumma, he was XG. He was supposed to have 37 goals scored on him. He had 37 goals scored on him. So he is basically par, and by that metric, he finishes in the top 50 within the big 5 goalkeepers in all the leagues.
But
so
he's the most experienced keeper in the league, or at least he will soon be, because at 21 years old, he has almost 200 appearances. So
I agree,
you're
but
not gonna get anyone like him.
Do you want to pay that money for basically a replacement level goalkeeper? I feel like, he's a great name. The name is the name, but the truth is that from a performance perspective, he does good. He does what he's supposed to do. That's a good thing. You could go worse, but it seems like you're paying a lot for that.
You need to trim that, Daniel. He was positive about Donnarumma there. You need to trim that and keep that for later.
You may need to pay for Zlatan in his 40th year.
Yeah.
All right, let's move up to the 5th position in the table. Roma securing Europa League football next year. Roma was quite of an interesting team this year, because they had some very good performances as well as some disappointing losses, I would say. How would you break down a team like Roma, Steve, during this year?
I think they've gone quietly about their work, under the radar. They've actually picked up 25 points since the restart, 8 wins, 1 draw, but the 3 losses I think probably stand out for their one-sidedness. We spoke a little while back about their performance against Napoli, and they almost changed to deal with Napoli's threats rather than doing their own thing. And I think Fonseca is a shrewd tactician, and I think you can expect them to improve. Again, they're quite a young side, aren't they? So I think they've got another year's experience in them now, but they do need to improve in certain areas. Their back line, their back 3 or their back 4, whichever they've employed so far this year, needs some improvement. Smalling isn't a long-term thing for them. I think they need to improve it in that area of the pitch. And if they can do that, then expect to see them around the same spot next year. But I can't see them at the moment jumping any higher than where they are.
Yeah, manager Fonseca has been switching between 3 in the back and 4 in the back. But you know what? For most of the season, they could not count on a player like Nicolò Zaniolo, who suffered a terrible knee injury and was able to come back for the last games. He's a difference maker, and I think that the team will revolve around him next year, along with Dzeko, another aging striker who makes a difference in Serie A. Who's coming to Roma next year is Pedro from Chelsea. How will it fit into Italian football?
Well, I think you'll find that they may change and play a lot more 4 at the back with 3 at the top. If they're going to bring in someone like that, again, I think he's in his mid-30s now. Is he still going to have the bite and the forward ability that he's had in previous years? Probably not. But like you say, they're going to build that side around the young fella, and that's going to be a big difference. But he won't be able to do it all on his own. He's going to need people like Dzeko and Pedro around him to carry some load for him. But again, you still need a platform to be able to create and score chances, and they're going to have to improve in other areas as well.
Well, I will tell you, seeing Pedro play against Arsenal this last weekend, it seems like he's still got a little bite, and he's got some intensity to him. That was a pleasant surprise. I do think that folks that have played in the EPL that moved to Serie A do have a bit of a resurgence. But what I'm really worried about with Roma is, they gave up 51 goals, and that's just too big of a number for them to be serious contenders. And I just don't know what they're going to be doing to address that. And I'm just generally curious, Steve, the Roma style of play in general, the American ownership structure and things like that, has that fared well in Serie A or not?
Yeah, I think. Would you say Roma are a path where they should be? Probably right now.
Yeah.
The ownership structure and the way they do things. It's not something I'm an expert in, so I'll have to defer to you on that one. But from a style of play perspective, I think they're one of the more interesting teams because, like I said, Fonseca's pretty shrewd around managing the side around what they're going to come up against. So they're not necessarily a Napoli style or Atalanta style where they don't change for anyone. I think he's morphed them into more of a, we'll do what we can based on who we're playing against. We'll still have our own principles in the way we try and build from the back and use the ball in certain areas. But I think he's also very tactically astute, and that's why he's been so successful as a manager before he came into Serie A. But moving forwards, that if he wants to create a team where it's very much possession style and it's this is what we want to do and create a template for the future, then I'll go back to it. He has to improve certain areas. You mentioned about the goals conceded. They let 51 goals in this year, but their XG against was 50.7, so they're bang on the money. They didn't do any better or any worse than they should have done. And when you compare that around the teams above them, they conceded the most goals.
Yeah.
Sassuolo down in 8th. We've already spoken about how much their attacking intent got them to where they got to. But 51 goals is a lot of goals to concede.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a big factor moving forward.
Well, I'm really struck. I mean, Lopez is a top 5 keeper. I mean, you look at the metrics within Serie A, so that's not the problem so much. But it's a case. It just strikes me as this case of offensitis. No offense to Daniele, but teams like to spend money on strikers and people that can score goals, like the Pedros of the world. And the truth is, they need to firm up that back line or sort out some better team defense or all of the above. But the good news is, I think they've got a keeper where they can kind of check that off the list and kind of focus on the other areas.
Yeah, and Roma has produced, or at least has had good keepers in the last few years. You guys remember how Alisson had his breakthrough season at Roma before joining Liverpool a few years ago. By the way, Roma's season is not over yet, as they will play Sevilla this Thursday, August 6th in Europa League. So we'll see if Fonseca will be able to bring a trophy to the capital. Let's move up to the 4th position. Lazio will play again Champions League football after 10 years. And I have to begin with Ciro Immobile. Ciro Immobile equalized the record for most Serie A goals most goals in a single Serie A season with 36. You guys want to know something romantic about it? He scored his 36th goal in the same goal that Gonzalo Higuain scored his 36 goals when he recorded that, when he had that incredible season in 2015-16 and when he scored 36 goals as well. It was his 3rd Serie A Golden Boot. He won it in 2013-14 and 2017-18. And you also know that he won the Golden Shoe. He beat the likes of Messi, Ronaldo, Lewandowski in Europe. And this is the first time since 2006, 2007 that the Golden Shoe has not been won by a La Liga player. How about that?
Yeah, penalties help, don't they?
They do, but you know what? Winners at the end of the day are winners. They are right. 14 out of 15 penalty kicks transferred from Immobile, so he had 22 goals on happening during a normal action. Steve, in 5 years, nobody is going to bring up the penalties. Everybody's going to say, "Oh, you know what? Immobile has 36 goals, and that's."
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But I think the scary factor for them is he scored nearly 50% of their goals this year. So they scored 79. He got 36 of them. You know, I'm a little bit concerned for them that one guy is carrying so much of the load. It's very Juventus-like in that, and I think you've seen in the post lockdown how much they rely on him. And when he fires and he scores, then they do well. But when he doesn't, or they struggle, it's generally down to the fact that he hasn't been able to influence so much of the game. And I think they need to grow their depth. I think they've got a good 11 to begin games. If he was picking his strongest 11 tomorrow, I think they would be a challenger again. But it's a depth issue for them, especially if they're going to start playing Champions League football and be stretched across the board week in, week out, 2 games a week. I think he's got some real work to do in the off season.
To add to this point, what's funny is that Lazio have the top scorer in the league and the top assist man in the league, Luis Alberto, with 15, finishing just one above Alejandro Gomez with 14. So despite having the guy that recorded the most assists and the guy that scored the most goals, Lazio only finished 4th. So this, I agree, this is an indicator that Lazio need to act on this transfer market window and, increase their depth, at least one player per position, I will say. Chris, are they all set with keepers? Strakosha?
No question. Top 3 keeper there. He was part of them being able to hold the position they were. Of course, Roma was a full 8 points below them. Strakosha, if you believe the expected goals, saved them 4 goals, which is probably worth 2 wins right there alone, 2 or 3 wins. So, what was been a little vexing is they were absolutely on fire pre-COVID, right? But they only managed to win 4 out of 10 matches during the post-COVID experience, and they lost against teams you just flat out can't. And to me, that's worrisome if you kind of line up these incredible personal performances, and that just kind of begs there are going to be some major fundamental issues on what needs to get fixed. Steve, what do you think what are the top 2 or 3 things that need to get fixed, do you think, for Lazio?
I think they need to bring in somebody to help them at the top. The 2 that have played regularly are very good for them, but I think they need somebody to come in and take the load off. Mobley's not getting any younger. They could do with someone there. And I think they rely so heavily, as we've spoken about, on Luis Alberto, which is fine. But we've seen a couple of times where he hasn't played post-lockdown and how lost they appear to be without him. Milinkovic-Savic is a good foil for him in that midfield too there, but they're going to need a little bit more depth in there. And then in the back line, I think they do okay there. But again, like Daniele said, it's just a case of not so much the starting team, but players who can come in and be a second choice centre back or a second choice, wing back or whichever way he feels they need to improve. But they certainly need more depth. You mentioned that they've lost 5 games in the kind of post lockdown period, and that's because they've played games twice a week, and they're going to do that come Champions League time as well. And I think you're going to find them with the same problems, and they've picked up only 16 points since the restart, which for a team who were pushing to win the title, just a short time ago, it's just not good enough. And the amount of games that they've played is not going to change come Champions League time.
So here's what I can't understand. They've scored 3 more goals than Juve did this year at 79, and they gave up 1 less goal than Juve, and they're sitting in 4th place. And that just shows you, it's not how many goals you score or how many you keep out. It's when you score those goals and when you keep those goals out, right? So I just find it a real head scratcher to me. Of all the leagues that I've seen Lazio come in fourth place behind Juve, a good solid 5 points behind. That's luck right there, right? It's right time, right place sort of thing. Do you have a view on that, Daniele?
Yeah, Chris, we're going to get to two teams, Atalanta and Inter, who scored more than Juventus and yet finished behind them. It's about, game management, knowing when to put the game to bed when you're up. And Juventus are masters of this with all the champions they have. They also get criticized a lot for doing that, but that gets them the win at the end of the day. And I'm sure they will keep doing that. Speaking of teams that scored more than Juventus, how about Atalanta, 98 goals? As we talked about last time, only Bayern Munich in Europe scored more goals with 100. Atalanta are able to really bring any players to goal. We have Gosens, the wing-back, finishing the season with 9 goals. Ilicic, Muriel, Malinovsky, Papu Gomez, Zapata. All these players really, Pasalic as well. They combine, they move so fluently under Gasperini, who, by the way, could win the manager of the year. They move so well that it's just amazing watching them. Atalanta have a big game coming up on Wednesday, August 12th, in the knockout stage quarterfinals against PSG. Have we already said everything about Atalanta, Chris, and Steve, over the past weeks, or is there anything left about them? I mean, third place is quite an accomplishment for a team that has such a low financial budget compared to the other teams.
Well, I mean, I'm going to kind of play to the area that I pay attention most. Golini has been a bit of a head scratcher for me because, if you look at the number of goals expected to be scored against them is about 33, 34, and he gave up 38. And 2 games, that's worth about 2 games there. And, 2 games puts them certainly in second place and really winning the whole thing. I don't want to put it just on him because sometimes there's unfortunate luck and things like that, but I wouldn't mind them going after a keeper that's going to give Golini a run for the money. And it's like everything else. How are they going to fix their back line, right? How are they going to work on their defensive elements? And, if you remember several podcasts ago, I was really struck by the few shot frequencies that they had, in large part because they played higher up. But when you play higher up, you are more vulnerable to counterattacks, one-on-one situations, which probably explains the Golini situation. But maybe you need to find a better 1v1 keeper if you're going to play that sort of style. So to me, it's about it's not an issue of offense now. It's kind of what Liverpool was, where they were at 2 or 3 years ago. The only problem is Liverpool had a hedge fund owner, right, who has plenty of money. And I would argue that Atalanta, in terms of points per euro spent, is probably the number 1 or number 2 behind Sheffield United. And I think Sheffield United is going to be an aberration. I think that's kind of one of those great once in a lifetime seasons. I think Atalanta is the real deal. And I'm hoping that they make a deep run in Champions so they can go and buy some defensive talent and buy a second keeper that's going to challenge Golini.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the one area that they desperately need improvement is between the posts. I think if you take the league table as it stands, and then you change it to the X point, they win the league quite comfortably, actually, by 3.5 points, which tells you everything you need to know about how well they've done. They make it to nearly 76 points according to the XG, the X point, which is remarkable given, like Chris said, their budget and what they've spent. And I don't think there's a team that could have done what they've done with the budget they've got. I think they've cultivated players through their system so well. I think Gasperini is a coach who improves players. I think there's a lot of coaches out there that buy to improve. I think Gasperini's taken the objective to coach to improve, which is a real breath of fresh air. And they know exactly what they're trying to achieve. They know exactly how they're trying to play, and teams know exactly how they're trying to play. And yet they're so difficult to stop. And the goals for column is amazing, really, when you consider the depth or lack of it that they do have in reality. That, you know, they rely so heavily on 5 or 6 players in those key areas, but they don't have a lot necessarily underneath them. And I think that in their back line, he's brought players in to help them achieve what they want to do with the ball. And I think sometimes to the detriment of their defensive structure and defensive solidity as a whole. You know, for example, you know, Toloi is one of the best centre backs at bringing the ball out from the back and his progressive passes into midfield. But is he the best defensive centre back? No. But Gasperini is willing to change that to allow them to do what they do. And I think, like Chris said, they are very, very livable like at the moment, where they just need 1 or 2 to really kick them on to the next level. And, you know, the future's very bright for them. And I just hope they can sustain it and bring in 1 or 2 more in Champions League football. Hopefully will allow them to do that moving forward.
Well, let me add one other thing, and then Danielle, I'd love to hear your take. I think there's about a 2-year window on this team right here, right? Because of the age of their squad, right? They've got a lot of 27, 28-year-old, 29-year-olds that are making a big difference. And I think I am not a fan of teams just going out and buying folks. You know, I really am. I love what Liverpool is doing, is just reinvesting in the players that they have, extending contracts. But in this particular case, I think you go for it. Well, and locking down that defense, and maybe you spend a little extra on a keeper, you get lucky on something. But even if you got a keeper that performed as they were expected to perform, they win the league, right? I mean, that's you're looking at it from the expected points. I'm looking at it from the expected goals against, and it all kind of points in one direction. So I think they got 24 months before they have to start to overhaul their squad. And I agree with you. I don't think there's a lot of depth behind that. And I want to believe the Atalanta dream. I do, right? But, man, it's really Getafe in La Liga is in a similar position. They've got an older squad, and they need to make something happen in the next 12 or 24 months, or they're resetting.
But Chris, I believe there is something in the Atalanta training ground that really takes the best out of each player, in that when Atalanta scout their players, they never buy big names. They buy semi-unknown players who come in, and then after a few games realize how good they are. So I do agree that they need a couple of champions, you know, a couple of top players if they want to make a run in Champions League, if they want to really challenge Juventus and Inter for the title. But at the same time, I'm sure they're going to keep the same mentality, the same process about recruiting very specifically, and then growing those players. Speaking of Gollini, he had to be subbed out for an injury against Inter. So Marco Sportiello could be the keeper starting against PSG on August 12th. Speaking of Inter, the Nerazzurri finished second at 82 points, only 1 point behind Juventus, but that doesn't tell the real story, because Juventus clinched their titles 2 match days ago and really slacked off after that. They lost the next 2 games. You know what's crazy? Conte finished the league in second position, and still there are talks of him leaving the team. And you know who could be the next year's coach? Massimiliano Allegri. That's insane, because I think that I understand how Conte, you know, he wears out players, but Inter now has an identity, playing with 3 in the back, emphasizing the wingers. The 2 strikers on top are doing very well with Sanchez. I'm talking about Lukaku and Martinez, with Sanchez as well performing well under Conte. What do you expect from next season, Steve?
Well, Conte described their performance Napoli as wonderful, which I think is probably the only positive word he's had to say in the last 2 weeks. And I think that probably plays into the hands of people who are suggesting he's going to move on. I think he's done a fantastic job with the team. It's the highest finish that they've had, I think, in 11 years. They've kept 5 clean sheets out of the last 6 games. They inflicted Atalanta's first defeat since the 20th of January. You know, it's a great game to finish the season off against Atalanta. You know, I thought it was a really quality game of football for 2 teams who had something to play for that was pride related, but it was a proper game. And they've been great all year. Every week, like I've said before, they become more and more Conte's team with his specific style of the way he wants to play the game, with the back 3 and the wing backs, and you know, the focal point of Lukaku at the top. And one thing I will say for him is he's very much a system and player related coach. So there's certainly players that he improves, but he brings in his players for his system, and his system doesn't function without those players. So, you know, he's been quite vocal about the club not supporting him and not bringing players in, but it's because he hasn't been able to bring in the players that he wants as opposed to what's already there. And Lukaku's gone under the radar in terms of any talk about him being player of the season, but I think he's got to be in the conversation. You know, their game against Napoli last week, where we got to see him versus Koulibaly, was box office in terms of a physical contest, and he came out on top in that one. And he's been fundamental to the way they want to play and the way they attack. And every single week he's been on the kind of score sheet or in the game in terms of what he's been able to bring to the side, and how Man United decided it was a good idea to let him go when he's in this form is extraordinary, really.
And speaking of players that Conte has recruited, Achraf Hakimi from Borussia Dortmund, right back or right wing back, is set to join Inter for next year. So the right flank is definitely looking good for the Nerazzurri. And I agree. I think that there has to be continuity in this Inter team. Conte, I think at the end of the day, will stay another year. And you guys may disagree, but they will be the biggest title contenders also because of the financial resources that Conte can count on. I can see him already in the room of the owner demanding 1, 2, 3 players that cost a lot of money and that he wants to bring to Milan to Milano. What do you guys think about it, Chris? Any views?
Well, I mean, I think with Conte, you know what you're going to get, and you know it's the devil or the angel, you know, and he has been able to take players that, quite honestly, he's gone back to the league that he saw a lot of, which was the English Premier League, and has been able to successfully recruit. I think that Eriksen, you would hope, needs a little more time to bed in and really start to become a significant contributor. There's been some strengthening with respect to the wingers. You know, it'd be very interesting, you know, that you see that they had 45 goals scored against them, which is an awfully big number when you consider.
Hold on, you're talking about Inter.
36 goals scored against them. So defensively, they're in great shape. Offensively, they're in great shape. You got to think they're 2 or 3 pieces away. And for some reason, continuity in Milan seem to be inconsistent words. They don't exist on either side of town. And I just don't know what the Inter ownership's going to want to do with COVID, realizing that they may not be able to sell any tickets for the foreseeable future. So it may end up, and I hope that Conte is reasonable enough to know that sometimes the dog won't hunt, and you got to work with what you have. And frankly, I see Juve going to have to fight really hard to stay where they are, and Inter seems to be on the ascension. So yeah, I actually feel really good about Inter next year. I would tab them to be the favorites for Serie A next year.
Chris, you said it. Yeah. Inter very solid defensively, 36 goals against, best defense in the league. Also, they have the fewest amount of losses, only 4 games lost this year. But guess what? The champions are still Juventus. Guys, what have we not said yet about the Scudetto champions?
I think they've been uninspiring as a headline. I think the last 2 games that they've played since they won the league title, now everyone has a drop off in kind of standards when things are achieved. Obviously, we saw that a little bit with Liverpool, but they still have Champions League football to play, and there's 2 games to get things in order before they travel to play in those games. And they've got beaten both games, and they've got beaten by one team, especially Calgary, who didn't really have anything to play for. And I think they've, like I said, been uninspiring. And there's a few mentalities that need shifting in that group, where when you win as much as they do, things become a bit stale. And I find it really difficult to believe that they're going to be able to retain a title for a 10th season in a row next season.
And you know what's going to be inspiring if they actually win this year's Champions League? They're playing this Friday, second leg against Lyon, starting from a 1-0 aggregate for the French team. Sarri, if he manages to bring the Big Ears Cup back to Turin, he will be a legend. At his first year with a double, that will be magnificent. I agree. Sarri ball has not, we've not seen the kind of Sarri ball that we saw at Napoli. But as we talked before, there needs to be time given to Sarri and to his players. Like Conte, he will certainly ask Agnelli for specific players. And Chris, what do you think about this Juventus team? Will they make it further in Champions League? It's going to be a different Champions League, because after the second leg, it's going to be knockout. So luck is going to be a big part of it. Episodes. What do you think about it?
Well, I think you brought up the right 4-letter word in describing Juventus: luck, right? I mean, in terms of they won. You look at the goal differentials; they won at the right time. I do think that Ronaldo and having the best keeper in the league, those are real difference makers. The harder you work, the luckier you get. I do think that doing anything for a decade is amazing. Consistency is so hard to do, and that's kind of what they've been able to do. They did have 7 losses, which would put them in 4th place if you look at who did the losing, but they did a pretty tidy job of minimizing those draws. So, I don't think that Juve is going to go deep in Champions League. I think 538's got them as the fourth or 5th highest probability. So there are a lot of teams in front of them on this. If Sarri wins, then that just shows you it's better to be luckier than right, because we haven't seen any Sarri ball. I mean, and sometimes when you have that sort of talent, you kind of stay out of the way of that talent, right? I mean, I like Pep's view, which is, oh, you want a great team? That's easy. Just get great players, right? That's far and away the number one thing, right? Great coaching and great tactic comes, second and third to that. So I just feel that it's been a remarkable achievement. I think people are getting kind of tired of Juve winning all the time, and I do think that there's going to be some great fights brewing. I don't think that's going to be brewing in Champions League. Steve, do you have a different view?
No, not really. I think the last game they played against Roma without Ronaldo, who was on the beach, I think, with his family, is a look into the future and what it could be like without him in the side. He's obviously made a lot of noise about how long he's going to play for, which is completely fair. But how long he stays at Juventus, I think, is the conversation that people need to have. His drive to go and achieve as much as he can in the game around the different leagues. Don't be surprised if it's not a long-term stay for him there. And and being able to replace his goals is just not feasible. And sometimes the sum of the team is greater than the parts, but in this case, it's the other way around. I think that he's saving them at the moment from kind of obscurity lower down. You know, you said, Chris, that they've lost 7 games this year. They've lost 4 in the lockdown, or post-lockdown. You know, they picked up 23 points in the post-lockdown games. You know, that puts them on par with a Roma, for example. Roma picked up more points in that window than they did. And I think they've got some areas they have to build into. I think losing Pjanic is, you know, it's got its financial ramifications for the club, but whether it's a good thing for the team, I think we're going to find out quickly. Obviously, he's not getting any younger, but he's still an integral part to the way they want to play. And I think Tom mentioned last week how they're becoming an aging side, and they need to kind of bring in a few younger faces to help regenerate that group. And certainly in the back line, you know, Chiellini's missed a lot of the season, for example, out injured. You know, and that's been a big factor. But he's not getting any younger, and that they have to improve in those areas for sure. In front of Szczesny and yeah, they have to do a little bit to change my mind about them finishing lower down next season.
Let me jump in on that counterpoint, and then Daniele, I'll love to hear your thoughts. The counterpoint is that Juve, they have a much better record against the top 4 than the other teams do. They have been able to win against their rivals, and they're also able to unpick the locks of the lower league teams that park the bus. And the way you do that, I think, is you have a ginormous payroll. You know, 300 million euros. You look at what Man City does. It's very challenging, I think, to have a team or the personnel to be able to unpick the lower league stuff, plus be able to beat your rivals pretty consistently. And let's take the last 2 losses out because it's the end of the season. They've already wrapped it up. Maybe the counter narrative is, you know, something they probably could have gone out and won those 2 games and finished a resounding 7 points or 8 points above any of their competitors. So are they really the aging squad thing is okay, but are they good for another year or so? Daniele, what's your take?
I think they are, Chris. They have built with that management, you know, Agnelli, Nedved. Those are really smart people. They have built a very good foundation, and the way they do things at Juventus, for instance, they were the first team that built their own stadium. That helping them a lot financially, but they're very smart. So even though it's true that players are aging, they're gonna be able to intervene on the market and replace them with likewise very good players. Steve talked about how Pjanic will be gone. I think that there has been a process of letting Bentancur growing in that position, and I think that now he's ready to take over. He's not quite the same players in terms of how he picks the ball and looks for he doesn't have, I would say, the same magnificent passes as Pjanic, but he's ready, I think, to take over. And like you said, in the back, why did they spend so much money on the league last year? Because they want to make him the next Chiellini, and they partner him up with Bonucci, who has taught him a lot of things, I'm sure, as well as Buffon still being in the locker room helped with teaching him about proper defending. They have Demiral, who was out for an ACL injury and will be back. Actually has been back in the past games and will be, I'm sure, a central part for this Juventus team. So I think they're still going to be dominant next year, and they're going to bring in Kulusevski, the Parma winger, who is very talented. And I would say another 1 or 2 players will join Juventus, like big names from the market. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I think they have to. I think there's no doubt they have to do that. I take your point about them blooding players into the side, but I also think that in moments like this, teams reveal themselves, and Liverpool, good example. 30 years to win a league title, they get beat the game after they've secured the title. Juventus get beat twice after securing the title, but they've still got Champions League football to play. And I'm afraid that as a team of champions and the standards that they should expect, there's no way they get beat in those last 2 games. If people are saying they don't matter, it doesn't really matter if we lose those games. I think that's fundamentally incorrect. They're a team of champions. They expect to win. They've got beat twice in a row. They've lost 7 games as a champion team. So you have to go all the way down. Lazio, for example, lost 8 games, but they lost 5 of them during post lockdown. I think they've got some issues that are being papered over by certain individuals in their side that are helping them massively. And like Daniele said, they've got really good people on their board and in their management group that are shrewd enough to change and invest, but they're not winning games. The players have got to win the games, and they need to bring 2 or 3 players in that are going to help regenerate that group again before they can kick on to the next level, because the teams behind them are improving, and they can win a league in an average season without a doubt. But can they win a league when there's 4 or 5 teams challenging? That's up for debate.
Well, Steve, I love you like a brother, but you look at what happened to Chelsea this weekend, losing Pulisic, and they're going to play against Bayern. It's like, forget about it, right? I would have had Ronaldo 2 massages a day, having pedicures, manicures, whatever it takes to keep him healthy, because at the end of the day, their greatness will not be by winning the domestic league. It will be by the Champions League at this point.
100%.
And you've got to protect your players. And if they're going to be against teams that are coming after you, my vote is to protect the players, and realizing that them having 4 or 5 light days before what could end up being a pretty challenging Champions League schedule if everything goes right, especially on top of 8 weeks of 2 games a week. I would just try to protect them as much as I can, realizing that even though I've got the biggest budget in Serie A, I'm still half the budget of what the EPL teams are, right? I just don't have the depth that everybody else has.
Well, Juventus has some big players who have never won the Champions League, like Buffon, Bonucci, Chiellini. Let's see if there will be enough to motivate the Bianconeri locker room in Lisbon, to get to the final of the Champions League. Guys, I think that we'll wrap the show up. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Chris, for our discussion, and thank you guys for this past weeks of match analysis, match previews. It was a fantastic time. Serie A will kick off again with the 2020-2021 season on September 19th. We will be back soon, but for now, enjoy the transfer rumors. Ciao.